Good morning, guys, and thank you for joining me. We're going to change things up a little bit today and see how you guys like it. I want to talk about an anomaly that I've been thinking a lot about, and it pertains to the natural world around us. And I like to think of myself as an awake and open person, that I can see the world around me for what it is. But this right here slipped my mind for the longest time, and I've been thinking about it for about the last month, and that is all of the organic matter that we see around us, like trees and flowers and plants and grass and anything that grows out of the ground. Now, the way that we as humans think about growth, right, is through our own eyes. So when we think about growing into a full-size adult, we think about eating meat, sustenance, and protein, etc. And the way that we apply that to the natural world around us paints us into a box. So I'd like you to open your mind for a minute and think logically about how a tree grows. Now, there's been a lot of information lately about how the fungi in the tree roots are more or less creating a neural network between all of the trees, and they're communicating. In fact, if you break down the actual structure, it looks a lot like the neurological patterns of our brains. And I don't think that that's coincidental by any means. I mean, let's just say you were going to program the world around you. Would you not use the same principles from organism to organism? I mean, even though we're very different in appearance to a tree, when you break everything down, there's more that we have in common than we don't. So, one of the big things we don't have in common with, say, a tree, or let's take a cactus, because that's a great example. So a cactus grows in the desert, right? And there's very, very little water and nutrients out there. Now I want you to ask yourself, you as a human, you have to consume calorie for calorie what your body uses, do you not? And that's just a matter of fact. You have to consume enough organic matter in order to translate that into physical growth. However, when you look at a cactus, or you look at a tree, or you look at any other plant, it's very easy to see that there is no way in hell they are pulling enough nutrients and biological matter out of the ground to account for the mass that they are gaining. So think about this. How much does a giant redwood tree weigh, right? Just think about it for a second. Thing's huge, astronomically huge. Like, you can't even fathom how much organic matter is packed into that tree. Now, do you think that tree pulled that amount of weight and nutrients out of the ground to grow? And this is where I got hung up for a long time, because I couldn't get past this hurdle. Scientists will tell you, yeah, but it doesn't make any sense at all. There's no way that it's pulling thousands and thousands and thousands of pounds of weight out of the ground through nutrients and water. Okay? Now, the main energy source for plants is the sun, or so we believe. I mean, that's what science tells us, right? And based on observation, it seems like there's a very strong case that that is their primary source of energy. But how in the world does a tree get to the size that it is, considering the amount of nutrients and water that it's pulling out of the ground? Like, literally, it's being created from almost nothing. It doesn't make any sense when you compare it to the rest of the natural world as far as the animal kingdom is concerned. It doesn't compare to how our bodies function by any means. Now, another thing that I've been hung up on, for example, is the fact of, like I said, these fungi in the ground are attaching to these root systems, right? And in turn, it's giving these plants nutrients and fungi and proteins and a whole bunch of stuff that it otherwise wouldn't have. Now, trees are very fascinating to begin with because we just like to look at them as a resource, as a fuel. However, without trees, without plants, without biological matter like that, we would all die, right? And that's obvious. The ecosystem that's been created for us to observe is so fantastical that it borders on magic, in my opinion, because like I said, there's a lot of shit that we cannot explain. So most people don't know this, but I find it fascinating. So let's say there's a bunch of trees in an old growth forest, right? And there's a tree that's dying. Okay? When that tree starts to die, it actually starts transferring all of its leftover resources that it knows it's not going to be able to use. It starts transferring it through these root systems with the help of this fungi to its ancestors. Now, it does give its resources to all the trees that are tied into that root system around it, right? However, what scientists have come to learn is that it has a predisposition to giving more resources to trees that genetically match the tree that's dying, the mother tree. So if it shares a genetic branch and it carries DNA in common with the tree that's dying, it will receive these resources in greater amounts than other trees. And not only that, but these systems extend for thousands and thousands and thousands of miles in some cases. When you look at Oregon, in the Olympic forest out there, the rainforest, that's the biggest natural living organism in the entire world. And if you really think about the world around you, you have to realize that these neural systems are absolutely everywhere under our feet. So why do people think that it's such a large leap to look at our world as a conscious being? Okay? Now, the problem that we've made as human beings is we like to separate ourselves from the natural world. It's the biggest mistake you could ever make in your entire life, because you're separating yourself from truth. The world tells you everything you need to know, okay? And organizations like Hollywood and the Illuminati, whatever you want to call these people, right? The NWO, I don't care what title you give them. They have to tell you the truth through one way or another, and you have to consensually remain blind. You know what? They told you exactly what the hell is going on around you. When they released the movie Avatar, they told you exactly what the hell was going on around you. The only thing that is a leap in that movie, for example, is the fact that they take their tails to connect with this system. Well, you know what? You don't need your tail to communicate with nature, okay? That was a metaphor for the third eye, for your spiritual being. And the more and more you come to realize that you are an individual, but you do not belong to an arena that's separate from everything around you, okay? Everything around you defines your life to one degree or another. And the more and more you open your eyes to the fact that it's a give and take system, that you can't expect not to have to give back and still thrive, right? Let's be honest with ourselves. We've put ourselves into a position where we expect instant gratification, where we think we know absolutely everything, when in fact we've been engineered away from nature since the beginning of history, since the beginning of modern civilization. They have slowly but surely taken us out of nature and huddled us into cities around bad energy to lower our vibration and turn us into mindless zombies. And that's exactly what's happened. we ourselves are capable of growing without receiving our sustenance from the material world. I'm not saying you don't have to eat, but what I'm telling you is your spiritual growth is 100% independent from the material world. Yes, you can live the cleanest lifestyle in the world. You can go work out every single day of the week, okay? And you can be in great health. But you're never going to be happy if you don't put the same effort into understanding the natural world around you. If you can't connect with the world around you, how could you ever expect to understand your place within it? And on top of that, if you're not willing to question the obvious glaring contradictions to what you're being told, then why are you even bothering trying to learn anything at all? Okay? Now, you learn a lot of things from nature, okay? Do you think that it's any coincidence we've lost the ability to learn on our own? Okay? We've lost that ability because it was taken from us, because we've been conditioned genetically not to be able to thrive without society giving us guidance, because we don't trust ourselves. We don't have a spiritual connection to the world around us. If you look at every other species of animal, you can see that genetic ancestry through DNA and knowledge is passed down from generation to generation, okay? And the reason animals have such an easy time with this is because they've never been taken out of nature. They've never been put into a false system. They've always lived inside of the dichotomy they were supposed to live inside of, without an influence from the outside world. And that right there is the major difference between us and them, okay? To a certain degree, people are going to tell me that that doesn't make a whole lot of sense, because we're completely different in how we operate from birth. Like, the way that our family interactions take place, how our mother nurtures us, etc., etc. Well, I'm telling you right now that back in the day, there was a whole lot more independence. Even when I was growing up, right, I had to learn a lot of stuff on my own, because being sheltered from the world around you to the degree where you can't learn from mistakes is a hindrance to your growth, okay? And the world around you wants to tell you that failure is a horrible thing and it should be avoided at all costs. However, nobody has ever changed the world without failing. And most of the time, the change that they made wasn't realized till much, much later on, because they were in touch with something greater than society around them. And this is the kind of stuff that you start thinking about when you observe the world around you, and you realize some stuff just can't be explained based upon anything other than observation. Because no matter what scientist I've asked, or anybody who's a botanist, they can sit there and give me mathematical equations over and over and over again, but when I break things down to the very basics, they have no answer as to how a tree grows to the size that it does, when there's no way to account for that mass gain when it comes to the nutrients that it's absorbing. So where is it getting this shape, this structure, this energy? How is it growing? How? Just how? Now, there has to be some sort of outside influence into this, and I think energy has a lot to do with it. And like I said, with these neural networks in the root systems operating like a giant hive mind, I think that trees, in essence, are the the very heartbeat of our Earth. Think of it as the Earth's cardiovascular system, and its brain all tied into one. And the more and more I look at the world, right, the more and more I start to realize that we may very well be living on an actual living entity with a consciousness, especially when you address things from a flat earth perspective, and then you start looking at the underground networks and systems inside of our earth, underneath our feet, and you look at oil and how it acts as a lubricant and it provides fuel and stored energy. It almost acts as though the fluid in which the earth operates off of, almost like a blood of some sort, in essence, maybe. Or you could look at oil as cartilage, right? That helps in aiding of friction, okay? And then you can look at magma as though it's blood vessels running through the earth, and there's no coincidence that we refer to, like, in mines, what do you refer to the source material as when you find it? It's a gold vein, it's a coal vein. When you have magma running underneath your feet in those chambers, those are magma veins, right? The earth has a lot of characteristics that remind you of a physical entity, of a structure, of a biological creature. And if you think about it, everything on this God's green earth is organic. It's an organic material. It would absolutely fit the definition of a living organism if you take a step outside of the box, okay? And that would make us literally a parasite, right? Think about that for a second. Now, there's such thing as a symbiotic relationship, don't get me wrong. I mean, sharks, right? They have tiny little fish that swim around them and wait for the scraps or whatever and clean the algae off of their backs and everything like that, and the sharks never bother them, right? And these fish will swim in the currents right next to these sharks all day long, every day, live their entire life cycle right next to these sharks. But the sharks don't care, because the sharks aren't being hindered by these fish. And it makes a lot of sense when you think about it. No problem. Have a good day, bud. So, us as human beings operating inside of this system that may very well be a living creature are doing nothing but harming the natural world. And let's be honest with ourselves, everything that we build has the intention of removing us further and further away from our source. That we are giving very little back to the earth around us. And I think that's why we've paid the penalty we've paid for a lot of the actions we've taken throughout the course of history. But in the grand scheme of things, the more people that come to realize this is the case, the more and more things start to change, and the more people start to wake up to the fact that we're living with a purpose. And not only that, but we're living with the means to change how things are perceived by other people, ultimately changing reality. Now, I think that this may tie in with the Mandela effect a lot more than people think, okay? Now, I've addressed this in a previous video, but I've thought about it a lot more, and I'm going to try to make this analogy a little bit easier to understand for people. So, there's a lot of us that own computers and own PlayStations or Xboxes, and as we all know, we have to receive software updates from time to time, correct? And Xbox and PlayStation has our user information, the location of our system based upon the Internet of Things, and where to send that data to, etc., etc. Now, their system automatically updates your computer without you having to do a damn thing, and it's really convenient, right? But PlayStation and Microsoft have a limited amount of resources at any given time, and of course they're going to try to remain as cost effective as possible because they're a business, right? So they're not going to just start sending out the entire package of updates without knowing that your system is there to receive it, right? So what does it do? It sends a few test packets to your system and waits for the system to respond, letting Microsoft or PlayStation know, okay, we can proceed to send this download to you. Now that we have that concept understood, let's take it a step further and think about ourselves as the hardware and our brain, the way that it operates our memories, as the software, correct? Now let's assume that there's a source who's trying to get through to a select individual, but it doesn't know where to send the information, and it doesn't want to send it to everybody because there's certain people who aren't supposed to receive this update, okay? What are you going to do? You're going to send out packets of information that are only recognized by the software in which you are trying to update. So, if you think about the Mandela effect as these packets of information, you have to consider that we are being primed to receive an update, okay? Think about it logically for a second. If we wanted to target a certain group of people based upon, like, let's say, ancestral DNA or something, how are you going to find them? You're going to change something that only their DNA is designed to notice the change in because there's an ancestral link to it. And I think that's what's going on with the Mandela effect, is it's preparing to update a group of people, and the reason that it needs to send out these small, minute changes and increase in quantities is to distinguish the difference between the average person and the person that's supposed to receive this information. Now, the more and more you start thinking about this, the more and more logical it starts to seem. Not only that, but I can't really picture very many other logical explanations as to what's going on. Bernie, who's going to sit there and ask me as to why I'm a huge proponent of the simulation theory, even though I sit here and talk about flat Earth, that's simply due to the fact that the flat Earth seems to make the most sense as far as how you would render a non-physical system, because the programming involved is a lot less complex when you take away curvature. And not only that, but if you want to talk about time travel and you believe in time travel and all of that stuff, do the equations not become a whole lot easier when you start thinking about things in terms of a computer program? Now, listen to me. Let's just say you have a hard drive, an old HDD, right? And you have the original operating system on it from the 1990s, right? Now, even though that's old technology, you can rewrite the data of that disk, put a new operating system on it, start a whole new system, correct? Now compare that to reality, and the resets that are obvious to see that have happened inside of the Earth. right? On inside the realm we live, right? There's obviously been cultural resets, yada yada yada. Now, there's also a very big likeness between these two things as well, because even though we've erased the original operating system from that hard drive, it's possible for me to go in with the right tools and restore almost all of the data that you had erased, written over, and started a new system over. Doesn't that sound a lot like ancestral DNA and ancestral history? And not only that, if you had the right tools, would you not be able to actually restore that old operating system and then insert yourself into it as long as the software was compatible? Just think about it for a minute, man. So, yes, we may be living in an observably flat realm, but if you're intellectually honest with yourself, you have to take what Tesla says at more than face value and realize that he observed the world as an electrical realm, where he believed that the moon, stars, and sun were all transistors and resistors inside of an electrical system with transformers and plasma arcs, and everything interacted with each other through energy transfer one way or another, whether you were conscious of it or not. And the more conscious you become of it, the more you can manipulate it. I mean, look at the Coral Castle, for example. How do you explain that? One man building the Coral Castle, moving over 1 million metric tons of stone by himself. I mean, and from time to time, these people come along. You know, let's tie this back into the time travel thing that I'm talking about, right? Where did this guy that built the Coral Castle get his information from? He had to have been restoring data that had been overwritten, observing and absorbing it, and then reinserting it inside of this iteration of the system. I mean, it's no different than a bug being left over from your previous operating system because the programmer missed something. We see it all the time. All the time, especially when you design video games, man. If the programmer misses something stupid, they have to patch the game with an update, and the average person that plays the game isn't going to notice any difference. However, somebody that plays the game all the time is going to realize, hey, this tree might have moved 4 inches this way because it triggers a glitch if I run into it. And where's the difference between that and a Mandela effect? There is absolutely no difference at all. Now that leads you into the category of, are there such thing as NPCs? Somebody asked me about this during my last live stream. And as far as NPCs are concerned, I think it would be ignorant to dismiss the possibility out of hand, because the world around us presents us with the same type of people over and over and over again. And I don't know if any of you guys have this experience in your life, but I have this experience quite often, where I notice certain types of people that always seem to have the same facial features, that always the same mannerisms, the same personality. They always look very, very similar to one another. Like a prime example of this is the guy that I report to in the morning when I pick my papers up. He gives me my information about complaints and what houses I need to restart or stop, or new deliveries and stuff like that, right? He's a ginger guy, a little bit bigger than average, a little husky, has a big old beard, curly, longer hair that comes down a little past his ears or whatever, and a deeper voice, like the typical Viking, right? That's what you would think of this guy as. But have you ever noticed that these people that present themselves in your lives over and over and over again seem to have commonalities between them, down to the point where it's eerie? And I don't think there's any coincidence that this happens on a day-to-day basis for any other reason than the fact that it's programmed into this existence. Now, you run into unique people all the time as well, and they stand out. and you remember them. A perfect example of this is Neo from The Matrix, when he's going through his training and they start walking down the street and there's a woman in a red dress that distracts him, and then all of a sudden his curiosity leads to him getting killed in theory through this lesson because she pulls a gun on him, turns into an agent or whatever. But maybe that's going on in our lives as well, to one degree or another. Now, I'm not saying all unique people are there to entice you to your detriment. That's not what I'm getting at. Some of them are. However, there is unique people that are not part of the system, that are operating against it. And if you look at a lot of these truth seekers, you'll see that there's a lot of diversity there. You don't see a lot of people that look alike. You don't see a lot of people that have the same mannerisms. Like, yes, we share the same ideas, but how we approach things are 100% different. I've never seen doppelgangers inside of the truth movement. It's not something that I've seen, and it contradicts my day-to-day experiences when I'm meeting random people. Now, I've lived in North Carolina, I've lived in Detroit, and I've lived in Massachusetts, and I'm telling you right now, there's a person from every one of those places that I could interchange with another person, and I would never know the difference. I would never know the difference if it was this guy I know from work, right, my boss, and this guy I knew in Michigan that I used to frickin', he was a family friend that we used to associate with. They are 100% identical, interchangeable, personality, look-wise, voice-wise, thought patterns, everything. And that doesn't make sense to me when I compare this to people who are searching for the truth and have original ideas. You don't see it all that often. Now, every now and again, you do end up seeing it. So that's why I think there's people that are playing for both sides here. So think about this. There's NPCs that are stuck somewhere in the middle, that are there just to facilitate little things, right? They're insignificant in the grand scheme of things. They don't have to have a soul. They don't have to have independent thought. They don't have to have free will. Now, they may have independent thought, but they don't have free will. Their ultimate path has been made up for them. They're always going to trigger the same outcome with you, no matter how your interaction takes place, unless you figure out how to diffuse the situation, okay? And they need your permission to cross that line. Now, here's a prime example. I'm pretty sure my dad is an NPC. Now, my dad always manages to trigger me, and I figured out over time that he manipulates it and does it the same way. Is no matter how well I'm living my life, he always finds the shortcoming of it, and I feed into it by getting defensive. Instead of just admitting, hey, this is my life, this is how I'm choosing to live, right? But this is what my father has always done, and it's always the same manipulation tactics, the same maneuvers to accomplish his task. And when I realized that I can dissolve this situation by simply telling him he is right, now, most people, when they hear you say, you know what, you're right, thank you for this advice, I really appreciate it, right? They usually take that as a compliment, and they're happy, you move on, you don't discuss the problem anymore, right? However, my father does not operate in this manner in any way, shape, or form. If you tell my father, you know what, you're right, I'm going to have to work on that as a person, and I appreciate you doing this for me, you have my best interests in mind, automatically he tries to find something else to trigger you by doing the same exact thing. So for example, walks into the house, bitches about the carpet being dirty, how he doesn't want to take his shoes off, you look like a slob. You know what, Dad, you're right, I'll get the vacuum and do that for you so you can be comfortable. You vacuum the floor, right? He sits down, sits in the couch, puts his hands in the fucking cushions. This couch is filthy, you're a slob. You know what, I'll fix that, you're right. And you can see he's getting more and more frustrated because you keep agreeing with him over and over again. Now, you haven't given him permission to get angry and start yelling and cause a confrontation, because you're feeding in to the opposite of what he wants to happen. Now, if you apply this logic with people who are trying to change your mentality, I think you're going to come to realize real soon that all of a sudden they don't hold any power over you anymore. And the more and more you do this to them, the more and more irate they become. You can see it on their face. You can almost think to yourself that they have gotten stumped, that they don't have a purpose anymore, that the entire reason for them interacting with you is to make this outcome come to be, and if it doesn't, they're not doing their jobs. They're just going to keep doing it over and over and over again. Why is there people like this in everybody's lives? We all have them. And then we have those select few, one or two friends, who we connect with on a vibrational level, and they do the complete opposite. They try to build you up instead of tear you down. But what does the natural world do to these people, right? They try to insert people like my father into those relationships to divide people. And that's what they do over and over again, no matter what. That's how they're going to live their lives. Now, there's different types of NPCs that are set to accomplish different things, but you see these personality characteristics manifest themselves over and over again with people who have way too much in common physically, mentally, verbally, their speech patterns, all of this stuff, for it to be any kind of coincidence. Here's another example of two people who look identical, that act the same exact way. My girlfriend's sister has a best friend. He's a big, fat, Puerto Rican mixed with black guy. And I don't have a problem with that, whatever. It is what it is. Your heritage is your heritage. You can't change your genetics. I'm never going to hold that against you. I only hold your personality, character, principles, your morals. That's what I hold against you, okay? Now, no matter what scenario you get yourself into in life with people like this, you can do your best to look after them. You can bend yourself over backwards to make sure these people don't hurt you. You can take every precaution you need. You could try to be the nicest person in the world to these people, right? But at the end of the day, all they're going to do is get you involved in a whole bunch of drama that you don't want to be in with somebody who you care significantly about, and that is their only purpose in life. And they may come across as the greatest person for 2 months on end, but it's only to do a self-serving interest, and most of the time it's not even self-serving. It only accomplishes your relationship being destroyed, and these people gain absolutely nothing from it. In fact, it ends up resetting their entire position within society. They lose their job, they lose their friends, they lose all the connections they had to anybody, and they have to restart building all of their personal relationships over again. And that's what happens with this kid over and over again. I got him a job delivering papers, trying to be a nice guy, because he got my girlfriend's sister. He got her best friend pregnant and married her, and he's not supporting his kids, doesn't have a job. His wife is out there busting her balls. He's a fat slob. He's gained 50 pounds since they got married. He's not taking care of himself, and all he does is cause drama. He tried splitting up his wife and my girlfriend's sister, who have been friends for over 12 years. They've done everything together, like literally stuff I don't even want to talk about together. It's disgusting. But that's the kind of relationship they have, right? They're really, really close. And what this kid does is he manipulates both sides of the relationship with everybody that he meets. So he tried to split those two up before they got married. And this is what I'm talking about, repeating patterns, to the point where he managed to manipulate that situation to a point where he ruined absolutely everything. They weren't friends anymore, but he wasn't with his wife right now at the time either. They ended up stopping talking to each other, whatever. So he had to restart his relationship with both of these women, right? And now He's managed to put himself back in between those two as friends, basically using her best friend, his wife's best friend, as a bargaining chip in the relationship, right? And using her as a pawn to watch his kids and everything else, etc., etc. Now, I get him this job, right? And he meets these two girls that are together where I work, and he starts to become best friends with them, okay? And not only that, he's buddy-buddy with everybody that I work with. And I don't associate with them. I go out and I do my paper route. I take my paycheck home at the end of the week. I don't hang out with anybody from work. I don't know anybody. And that's the way I like things. But this kid is complete opposite. He'll get involved with everybody. And his only purpose is to stir drama up. So he ends up doing this for 3 or 4 months. He's stealing papers off of people's routes to get him in trouble. He's telling these two girls that are together that they're both cheating on each other, freaking filling their heads with all kinds of craziness. And at the same time, he's so good at what he does, they don't even realize that he's the one pulling the strings, because people don't know how to communicate anymore, which is what these NPCs use to their advantage. So because we lack communication skills, and we've come so far out of nature and understanding that we have to communicate with each other in order to prosper, these entities can use it to their advantage and just insert themselves in our relationships and destroy us. And he ended up losing his job, but not before he ruined 3 friendships and ended up costing the company a whole bunch of money, and ending up almost destroying these two girls' lives that have been together for over 10 years. And now he gets to restart all over again and insert himself into a whole bunch of other people's lives and do it all over again. And what does this kid gain from any of this except serving a system that does nothing but destroy humanity? And that's the theme over and over again, whether it be with technology, whether it be with NPCs, whether it be with this globe deception, Helios model, whether it be the Luciferian practices, the occult changes to our holidays. It's all to separate us away from nature and our natural God-given human instincts and the historical DNA being given to us. And everything that's happening right now as far as waking up to the truth is doing nothing but waking more and more people up to the fact that this is what's really going on. And the more and more of us that raise our vibrations, the more and more people are going to start seeing these NPCs and these entities and the world for what it is. And I myself cannot wait to see where this is going. I thank you guys for taking the time to listen. I hope the audio is better. Have a good morning.